thank you so much, first of all, for agreeing to do that. Welcome. Because I think there's a growing need of people to connect to the natural way of healing the body, the mind, and beyond.
Most definitely, yeah. Happy to be here.
Yes, and thank you for the work you do, because I know how much it takes to be there for people and to take on that responsibility.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my honor.
Yeah. So the way we work in the Breathe, Feel, Heal community, we connect truly first as humans. And I believe that every human journey, especially when it comes to doctors, healing, or meditation, whatever it is that people offer as a modality, comes with their personal journey.
Oh yeah.
And I felt if you don't mind sharing yours, and
I've got a story.
Yes,
I've got a story.
Let's hear it.
Nothing dramatic, but it's a story, and it's one that I think really was influential for me. I grew up in a very small town, Northern Ontario. It was a wonderful, childhood growing up in this town, in this community. But we didn't know anything better than having a regular Western doctor, and we grew up just doing that type of pattern, that type of healthcare pattern. And ultimately, we had a number of life-changing events in our family. And sadly, I had two uncles that passed away within a year of each other when I was about the age of 12 to 13. And both my parents lost a brother at that time from chronic degenerative disease. And I remember asking my parents, and I remember watching my uncles go through their treatment. They were taking their medicines, they were going to their appointments, but they were withering away. They were getting sicker and sicker, and ultimately they passed from these conditions. And I just remember asking my parents. I said, "Well, how come the medicine didn't work?" And of course, my poor parents didn't have the answer for me. But that moment really changed their philosophy on health and wellness, because suddenly we were that family in the 80s, and I'm dating myself, but that's okay. We were that weird family that suddenly started drinking vegetable juice at dinner and having cod liver oil shots, before we went to school in the morning. Not shots, but tablespoons. And it was the worst stuff ever, as any of you would know, doing cod liver oil before it is what it is today. But ultimately, I remember kind of at first, bucking it and saying, "Oh, this is gross. I don't want that." But then I remember a few years in, my parents were thriving in their careers, in their athletics. They weren't sick. My siblings and I, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, we were thriving in all of our, endeavors. And, it just didn't really dawn on me that it had anything to do with our diet and lifestyle. But then I really started to take this passion into clinical nutrition. And when I knew I wanted to be a doctor, I didn't know, again, any different type at that time, but I started asking questions. And I went and did my pre-med, and really enjoyed that. And while I was applying to medical schools, I would ask the schools, I say, "So I'm really excited about the nutritional program, because Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said, 'Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food.'" And I would say, "So tell me about your nutritional program." And you can imagine how that conversation went, 20, 25 years ago. It was, crickets, or the best answer I got was, "Oh, you're going to get 4 hours." And I'm like, "Fantastic. This is the school for me. 4 hours a week, right? 4 hours a day. What is it?" They're like, "Oh, no. 4 hours in your entire med school." And I was like, and it just made me pause for a moment there. And, I work very closely with Western doctors. This is not to speak ill of that. It is a very, very critical piece of our healthcare system. But it's not the only piece, and it shouldn't be necessarily the first piece for many of the conditions that we're facing with today. So back to my story. At the last minute, I changed and I rerouted my applications towards naturopathic medicine, because I heard about this literally probably about the month before my applications were going out. I went and checked it out quickly. Didn't really know. I was like, okay, I guess so, but there's a ton of nutrition there. This looks far better suited to me. And as I obviously went into naturopathic medicine, it really just opened the doors. And I still always had this clinical biochemistry background. I still had this scientific background, and I wanted to merge the natural therapies with that knowledge and training. So enter in functional medicine. And functional medicine became relatively new when I graduated naturopathic medicine, but I gravitated to that right away, because that was really bridging the technology, the science, and the data that I really get passionate about with the natural therapies. And we didn't really get a ton of that training other than just the pure therapies in naturopathic school. So I immediately went and became more trained afterwards, and at the time it's crazy. I was actually one of 7 who was board certified in Canada, and it's clearly much bigger now, much more popular now, but it's something I've been doing for the better part of my career, which is almost 20 years now. So that's how I ended up here.
Yay. Yeah. It's a great story. I love the small town and just having that awareness, expanding the awareness, because that's a metaphor of it, right? Like your life is a metaphor.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And for some of the people that don't know, I've met Dr. Dempster on my journey when I've experienced a burnout, which turned out to be a crisis in my life, and I was not retaining any nutrients. I was rushed into an ER with symptoms of a stroke that nobody knew what it is. So you and I did an extensive testing. You gave me a bunch of supplements, and then my journey started, my real health journey. Because before that, I've always been into natural medicine. I've always been using acupuncture, homeopathy, but never have looked in a holistic way, like just the whole body. Right now, you sit down, be present, look at your body, look at everything that's going on. And maybe you can tell us, what do you guys do more in the clinic here, and then we can dive into the nitty-gritty stuff.
Sure. Well, we see a lot of patients that come to us for a number of conditions, but there's three main buckets that we see a lot of. We see a lot of those who are dealing with an autoimmune disease, and right now there's well over 200 diagnosable autoimmune conditions. It is a massive issue, especially in developed nations. So a lot of the times people are looking for answers as to why this has happened, and that's really our philosophy, is to help people get to the root of the issue as much as they can. Help them to identify, I call these blind spots, things that we can't see very easily on the surface, but if we do the right digging, we can often unearth them and expose them. So we see a lot of autoimmune conditions. We see a lot of chronic digestive conditions. So that can be IBD, like Crohn's and colitis. That can be things like IBS and everything in between. And the third bucket, which is an emerging bucket, and I'm very excited to see this bucket grow more and more, is what I call optimal aging. And these are people that are high performance individuals like yourself, or anybody else out there that might not already have a diagnosis and feel sick, but they are smart enough and aware enough to say, hey, optimal health is not just the absence of disease. I have to work at this. So they want to get a roadmap. They want to get a blueprint onto how they can optimize their health. So this is something that more and more people are starting to be very much advocates for their health, and we just look at being their coaches and linking arms with them to give them those tools so that we can personalize a natural treatment for them. So those are the three main areas that I tend to see in my clinic.
It's interesting. So can we dive a little deeper into the autoimmune? Because there's a lot of conditions. For example, I suffer from endometriosis that's been progressively, no matter, like I am experiencing it emotionally, but it is almost like an autoimmune disease.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And there, as you said, there's over 200 now. Yeah. So what are you noticing with people coming with autoimmune diseases? What are some of is there an emotional correlation? I'm a huge fan of Gabor Mate, and I'm sure you see a lot of that work with patients, because you speak with them and you feel their humanness.
Well, it's interesting to bring that up. I actually hosted a summit 8 years ago, co-hosted with a very dear friend of mine, called the Mental Wellness Summit. And we interviewed some of the top doctors in the world that are dealing with stress, anxiety, depression, and all the mental health conditions. And as we all know, mental health has continued to become a burden and a problem. So to your question about autoimmune disease, what we try to do is we really help to isolate where these individual triggers are from. And autoimmune disease is very interesting, because autoimmune disease is a perfect storm, which means it's a collection of a number of factors. It is not usually one symptom, or excuse me, one trigger that causes this. It's a number of things that have been building up over our time, and it's usually one little thing that tips you over the end. But it's when we start to unpack it, we see imbalances in their gut, we see imbalances in their hormones, we see imbalances in their nutrients, we see toxic burden extreme, we see all sorts of signs of vagal nerve dysfunction. And this might get a bit more to your question and to the discussion about stress and how does that impact us. We are so torn these days with so many things, whether it's career, family, even just sitting in traffic to and from our jobs, dealing with finances, world issues, and we've all been through lots of things globally in the last 5 years especially, and that's not going to go away. So what I really try to help encourage my patients is to help create a better buffering system for these stressors, because we don't know what life's going to throw at us, but we've got to be able to deal with it the best way we can, because we can't just run and hide and stick our head in the sand. We've got to be there for our family. We've got to be there for our spouse, for our children, for our aging parents, whoever that might be, and we've got to be the best version of ourselves to do that. So we really help try to figure out, how can we fortify you? So we're going to measure to see how your stress hormones are functioning. A lot of times they're not functioning that well. And then we start to figure out, okay, why is that? What can we do? Are we dealing with a number of different nutrient deficiencies that if we target those deficiencies, they're going to have a huge downstream impact, not only on our stress support, but on inflammation control. And that's a massive conversation with autoimmune disease. We are going to start to look and remove for any exogenous toxins that we're being exposed to in our environment or in our diet or in our ecosystem inside of our gut microbiome that are releasing toxins. If we tidy up our gut, that is the foundation to a tremendous amount of healing that can happen in our body. And there's many other factors. Like we literally present each patient with what's called a functional medicine wheel, and it's got 12 different items on it that we consider for each patient, and we evaluate and figure out, okay, which ones should we prioritize? And some of them even involve what we call electrosmog, or different types of sensitivities that people can have to their environmental triggers that go beyond the usual toxins. It's a bit more energetic toxicity, like things that could be coming from the Wi-Fi we hear of. Yeah. But even just having electrical outlets close to your bed, like these can be for the wrong person, that can be very disruptive, because our bodies, while we're so physiologically driven by biochemistry, we are driven ultimately through energy. Yes. And we can't forget that. The power of reducing stress by breath work, which is obviously something you're involved in. We speak to every single one of our patients and we teach them how to breathe. Yeah. Something we all take for granted. We breathe to survive. We don't breathe to thrive. Yeah. And we want to make sure that we are supporting what a proper breathing technique and the impact that can have. In fact, again, you'll know this better than anybody, but some of the research that's come out of some of the leading institutions right now shows that all you have to do is 10 consecutive deep breaths, and you will buffer your stress hormones by up to 40%. And if you do that every hour throughout the day, it becomes habit. So these are simple things that we can do.
Yeah, and I like what you said, absolutely. I tell people when they come to class and they're like, but do I have to come to class to breathe? And I'm like, absolutely not. But if we were doing it properly, we don't have to have classes. And the first thing we do on this earth is to take a breath, and the last thing is to exhale it. So it definitely has a role in our overall existence on earth. But I like what you said about energy, and I want to go back to that, if you don't mind, because in breathwork, when people come, and that's why we're here today, because no modality is only powerful or only healing. We exist in this integrative network of healing and medicine, so speaking, and we are an energetic being. And I feel that this Cartesian style of healing that you've mentioned, even with traditional medicine, yes, it has a role, but I think its role has eliminated that energetic existence. Right. Like I see when people breathe, the energy literally exits the body. Like we see how chronic pain disappears with only couple of sessions. I have people coming after giving birth with pinched nerves. Usually the back is very impacted after breastfeeding and all that. It disappears in one session. So that's it. That's your own energy healing the body. And I feel, as you said, all the plugs. So this might become a little overwhelming for people. And I know it is. Usually people that start going on a holistic journey, they're like, what do I do first? Do I fix my food? Do I fix my... And it adds to the stress, I feel. When there's no guidance, when there's this self-help mentality, which it's not to blame, but it is occurring. There's a whole business around that, right? Like the self-helping industry. So what can we tell people? Like from my perspective, I say, going back to the breath, this is the home. This is home. This is safe refuge. And then you can slowly explore other things. From your perspective, what is the first thing people need to look at?
Truthfully, it's what resonates with them, because we've got this whole wheel and there's no start to end to a circle, right? So we pinpoint some area that resonates with them, and I will guide them with that. I've done an assessment already, so I'll have some ideas of where those imbalances sit, and we'll focus on that. And the first thing we educate our patients is that it's not about perfection. Right about now, anybody who's, again, self-helping or Google doctoring their way through health and wellness, it's a very exciting time because we have access to all this information, but it's extremely confusing. Even expert to expert are not going to shout the same message. And so oftentimes people can get really caught up in all these various different types of therapies and modalities, and they have no idea where to begin. They have paralysis by analysis. And we really want to say, look, first of all, the the perfect aspect of humans is that we're imperfect.
Yes,
so let's just slow down. Let's not focus on doing everything all at once. Let's not focus on doing it perfectly. Let's focus on making progress. And what that means is like do something better or different than you did the day before, and then the week before, and then the month before. And it has this massive compounding impact when we just do little things differently and better each day. So again, we're going to be coaching our clients and patients through this by navigating and creating a blueprint that shows us where the priorities are for them. So I do think breath work is very important. I also think healing your gut is incredibly important. If we don't heal our gut, and this is more from, again, a biochemical standpoint, all inflammation begins in our gut. 80% of our immune system resides in our gut. A significant amount of our hormones are produced in and around our gut. I could go on.
And your intuition sits in your gut, as I like to say.
Absolutely. This is our second brain. This is our enteric nervous system, and it's connected to our central nervous system by the vagal nerve, which is also a very underestimated way of healing somebody. So many of us are trapped in the fight or flight, which is the sympathetic dominant state because of our busyness, because of what's going on in our society. And this is not always, through any direct fault of our own. We're a product of our environment, but we also need to take control of it and not let it control us. So I really see a lot of people who are trapped in that fight or flight, and we work on resetting that vagus nerve and that vagal nerve tone, because that will actually shift you over to the parasympathetic when you improve that tonicity. So in breathing, one of the most powerful ways to do that.
Yes, and we actually do one of the exhales after each round. We do activate the vagus nerve.
Great.
Because that's how it's so simple. It's so simple, yet we never do it, and it's so important for our entire health, like not just body but mind and stress release.
Your body cannot heal when it's in the fight or flight. That is your stress response. That's your survival mechanism. It only heals when you're in the parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, and repair. And so I would love to open a bracket here, because this is a huge part of my practice and what is part of my story and how I came to be exiting marketing, going into breathing. And I never realized that breathing will be, for example, when I go and we film and we have all these complex productions and somebody's nervous, I'm like, let's take a deep breath. But going into the business, because as you said, it's not our fault, but quite often we're faulted into it. You're consuming too much, you're working too much, you're trying to spread yourself too thin, but we are a product of the environment that has been created for various reasons, political, socio-economic, all of that. But the problem that people usually face is, well, what am I going to do? Quit my job? Right? This is the first answer I get. I can't quit my job. Can you?
I can't quit still my job. So I know what I advise people. So breath work is something that they can do in the morning, they can do in the evening. How do we tackle this? Because it is an epidemic. Research is saying it is an epidemic. We are now seeing younger and younger people being faced with depression, anxiety, their burnout. Like we're talking people at the age of 12 and 15 now.
I see it. I see it clinically.
So can you speak a little more about your experience with burnout and the busyness, and how does it manifest in the body?
Well, and this is where I get really excited about it, because I can actually measure it. Yes, you can actually palpate somebody. If you've been doing this long enough, you can feel when somebody's burnt out and you can see it. But ultimately, we can also prove it and show it on paper, right? And so, I am seeing children all the way up right now that are under serious demands. They're also, overfed and completely nutrient deprived, many of them at first. And as we educate their parents how to put proper food on the table, that changes things pretty quick. But the number one thing that I think we need to look at is we need to learn how to sleep. And and breathing, I think, is already number one. But the next thing to breathing is we need to make sure that we do not take sleep for granted, because sleep is also a massive area of resetting our hormones and promoting the proper detoxification strategies that our body requires, reducing that inflammation that happens when we sleep properly. And we tend to say, I got a few more things to do. I can get away with 5 hours.
That's the first thing we cut, right?
It's the first thing we cut. So, and sleep's a big topic, and obviously this is a much bigger conversation than we'll get into today. But if we can do anything right now, is to take stock of what your sleep habits are and really start to reverse engineer that. And there's a number of ways, and we can touch on a few if you'd like, but there's a number of ways you can start to improve your sleep right away. Number one,
let's talk about it.
Let's touch on it. Well, I'm going to leave you with a couple of key sort of rules
nuggets.
of thumb.
I love that, gold nugget.
One is, think of your sleeping area as a cold, dark cave. It's got to be cool, not cold so that you are freezing like a freezer, but it's got to be cooler than your daily temperature, because this will actually, when we're under our sheets, and this will put us into a deeper sleep state. What's really exciting is I'm actually involved in a sleep research project, and we look at all the metrics with sleep. I'm wearing a device right now, and there's different wearables out there that can give you data that shows you, empirically how things are going to change. But if we can have a cold, dark, so it's got to be very, very dark in there, and I'm not, even the slightest little bit of light coming from an alarm clock can disrupt our circadian rhythms. And high level, there's a couple of very key hormones that you want balanced. You want your cortisol to be low, and you want your melatonin to be coming up. And I'm going to oversimplify it, but that's really what we want. When your body perceives light, when it's sleep time, your cortisol immediately starts to come up, specifically if it's the traditional blue lights that are, in a lot of our typical light bulbs. So there's lots of wonderful red light bulbs that are out there now that you can use in the evening that will help. But the other thing is you want it to be quiet, right? So a cave is quiet, it's cool, it's dark. And there's a lot of background noise usually in the city and in urban environments, but do your best to reduce that. The other group of nuggets that I'll leave you with right now is called the 3-2-1 rule. 3 hours before bed, no more food. Okay, we should not be sleeping when we're digesting. You might think you get a good sleep, but your detox and your hormonal reset patterns are going to be disrupted if you're focusing all on digestion. 2 hours before bed, we want to reduce fluids. And this is a big one. 1 hour before bed, we want to get off of screens. And this is the other thing that you mentioned, what do I see as a problem? I see sleep as a problem. I see screens and social media as a big, it's a double-edged sword out there right now, but especially with young kids, there's a massive dopamine connection, cortisol connection happening with
and
a lot of...
dependency, I would even call it dependency.
Yeah, and I'm not anti-technology, I'm very pro-technology.
Obviously we're here
we have social media channels and we can use them, but what we want to get away from is like the doom scrolling and some of the content that we might be looking at, especially leading up to sleep time, which is going to completely disrupt.
Brain numbing, it's brain numbing, right?
So that's a couple, I think, important things to think of.
Yeah, no, I think that those are very important because, as you said, breathing, sleeping, these are the restorative functions that we are given. They're gifts to us, right? So
That's it.
And those are the first two we eliminate, and then we go and suit with food, most of the cases, and substances. But I know we weren't planning on this, but I have a lot of parents that come to me for children, and it's a sensitive topic because it's very hard to bring. I have worked with kids. Younger kids are easier to bring to breathing, and they immediately get it when I tell them, breathe with your tummy, because that's the first thing that people ask. What is the one thing you're going to teach me? And I'm like, breathe with your tummy. Yeah. Because we breathe very shallow. They get it right away, and I'm like, this is a balloon, expand it, they get it right away. Older kids and the ones that actually need help right now, which is the youth. First of all, we can't get them to a class because they have no concept, because there's no education on these things. But we know there's a problem. A lot of the kids right now are medicated just for lack of better treatment or information out there, and that's not to blame parents or the system. This is just the only thing that's right now it's accessible, or they think it's accessible.
It's the first thing that
it's the first thing to. So can we speak a little more about that, because you work with a lot of people, and I'm sure
work with a lot of children.
You have a lot of children.
Yeah, we do, and it's fascinating and unfortunately sad to see the amount of kids that come in initially that are on a lot of medications. Time and a place for certain meds, absolutely, but the amount of anxiety medications and ADHD medications, and I just see it going up and up and up. And I truly believe that we can come at this very differently. And if we start to look at our diet and our lifestyle and the environment these kids are brought up in, we do the best we can as parents. There's no playbook. But I still think sometimes we can improve and get better, right? I know my wife and I were constantly trying to evaluate what we're doing, and we're not perfect, but we're trying to do the best for our kids by making sure that we're putting the right food on their tables.
How old are your kids?
8, 6, and almost 4.
Yes. A long way to go, Dr. Dem. You're going to go through a lot of stories.
I'm keeping my ability to manage stress. I'm trying to create a good buffer system there, but it's a wonderful time, and they're a wonderful age right now. But it really does break my heart when I see patients come in, and I literally have, I can't tell you how many child patients that come in that are struggling with these areas and many other things.
Yeah.
And so we really want to focus on creating that foundation for them. We want to create that healing foundation for them. And that, in my opinion, we can really do our children a lot of favors if we can just address what we eat.
Lead by example.
Yeah, how we breathe, how we sleep, how we move.
So if people want to start their journey with you, how does it work? Where do we start?
Well, first of all, jump on our website. It's thedempsterclinic.com. There's a lot of resources on there that you can start to read and learn about what we do here. And if you still have a few questions, we also offer the courtesy of booking a discovery call with us, which is a complimentary 15-minute call. If you had any questions about functional medicine or about what we do specifically, give us a call and we'll set that up for you. But if somebody's ready to take the leap right away, which many are, then we book you in for an initial appointment, and that's about an hour long, and then we start our assessment there. And it becomes quite exciting at that point, because then it's a very personalized, it's going to be focused on you and your goals, and that's what's exciting about it.
And that's a question I get often. How long does it take?
Well,
that's the inquiring mind that wants to fix something that has taken 30 years or 40 years to fix it in 2 months.
Yeah, well, I think the best answer I've got is it depends on you. Mm-hmm. And it depends on how fast you want to go. It depends on how committed you are to the program. Those who do everything we ask them to do are going to get far quicker and far better results. But ultimately, it really depends on what your goals are. Are we dealing with a chronic degenerative disease that's been happening, that's taken 40 years to occur in the body? That doesn't go away in a week. Or there are other things that are a bit more acute that we can help rather quickly. It really depends on their goals and their commitment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sorry, I have another question. It keeps coming. I'll splice them. Just because I have a lot of people that come with H. pylori, and I know the current treatment that's in the medical system is this invasive set of antibiotics, sometimes repeated 2 or 3 times one after another, which completely destroys the gut.
We see it a lot.
Yeah.
And we see H. pylori a lot now. Oftentimes we don't need to go to the antibiotic route because we're addressing what is some of the other stealth infections that are along the H. pylori, that if we reduce their strength and their veracity, then we have a better ability to go after the H. pylori as well. And there's a number of different natural products that we use to eradicate H. pylori, but we see tremendous success by doing this approach.
Yeah, and I have to say, when I first started with you, I had H. pylori. We started the treatment, and then when I continued with food, just completely changing my food habits, the meditation, the breathwork, gone. I've been 3 years now. Almost gone completely.
That's excellent.
So I'm a true testament that it works the natural way.
Yeah.
Works. Anything else that we haven't touched, Dr. Dempster, and you feel that it's important to send this a message?
Well, I'm going to just reaffirm what we did touch on. Again, it's not about feeling you have all these things that you have to do at once. Start with one thing. Reach out, connect with a doctor that resonates with you, a functional trained doctor that can help you navigate this world from a natural perspective and create that foundation of health and healing. But don't feel like you have to have all this information at once. That's what my job is to be the filter of that. And we present to our patients, the up-to-date research and data and the best techniques to help them. And, it's very easy to kind of get overwhelmed by Googling and, listening to every podcast. And so I literally have some people that initially come to me and they spend half the day listening to different podcasts, which in a way is kind of, okay, that's great, but at the same time it's like, that's not great, because you're going to just keep getting conflicting information. We have to treat the person, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes to me is that we have to accept that, and you touched upon this, we are imperfect, and healing the body and being in good health is a continuous journey until the last breath. Because you may come and you may take all the supplements, follow your advice, in 3 months from there you go back to eating your greasy food and not sleeping and not breathing properly and being neglectful to yourself, you're going to go into the exact same problem.
That's it. Yeah, no, I agree. It's about, again, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. And if you can just start by doing one thing better, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to get a tremendous return on that investment, as we say.
Yeah. And what I love about this type of healing and just care, self-care, is that then you radiate, then it shows to other people, then that's the example you want to send to your kids, to your relatives, rather than going and telling them, oh, you should go try Dr. Dempster, he's great. When you're a testament for the great work, that is what really, and in Breathe, Feel, Heal, that's what we say in the communities. We can't change the world, we can't stop the wars, we can't stop all of that, but what we can do is work on ourselves, and that shows, and then that is the contagious part we want.
I believe it.
That's how we change the world.